Hey listener, welcome. I'm glad you could join me tonight. I'm your storyteller, and I'll be your companion as you drift off to sleep. Or perhaps as you lie there wide awake, listening to this story, unsure if you'll ever fall asleep again. I didn't expect this to happen. I really didn't. I used to love dollar stores. There was something kind of comforting about them, don't you think? Cheap snacks, random knickknacks, cleaning supplies. Everything was familiar, predictable. It was a quick escape from the real world. But that all changed one evening. And now, I can't walk into one without thinking about that place. And I haven't been back since. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Sophie. I was 24 at the time this all started, and I live in a small town just outside of the city. I had just moved into a new apartment with my roommate, Mia. We were both fresh out of college, just starting to figure life out. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. Just two girls in their early 20s trying to live like regular people. I worked at a small cafe downtown. Mia was a receptionist at a law firm. The usual. It all started on a normal Wednesday evening. The weather was overcast, typical for late autumn. Mia was working late, and I decided to go to the dollar store to pick up some snacks and a few cleaning supplies. I always went to the same one. It was a bit run down, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was on the far side of town, past the train tracks, and not a place many people went unless they lived nearby. The store was mostly empty when I arrived, except for an elderly woman browsing the aisles. The air inside felt stale, but the fluorescent lights flickered overhead like they always did. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I walked down the aisles, grabbing the usual chips, bottled water, dish soap, and then something caught my eye. It was at the very back of the store, near the old storage room that was never unlocked. It wasn't part of the regular aisles, but there, behind a stack of cleaning supplies, was a small, dusty shelf. It was covered in cobwebs, and the items on it seemed off. They weren't the usual cheap plastic toys or kitchenware. No, these were different. There were trinkets I couldn't quite place, old, faded dolls that looked like they had been sitting there for decades, cracked mirrors with dark smudges, and strange little boxes that looked like they belonged in some kind of antique shop. What caught my attention the most was a small, unmarked box with a weird symbol on it. I reached for it without thinking, and as soon as my fingers brushed against the lid, the temperature in the store seemed to drop. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the chill from the broken air conditioning. I turned around to leave, but the moment I reached the checkout, something happened. The cashier, an older woman with gray hair and thick glasses, looked at me in confusion as she scanned my items. "That'll be $14.50, she said, her voice strangely flat. She pressed a button, but the register didn't beep. "Strange," she muttered, tapping at the machine again. "It's not ringing up. Is there a problem?" I asked, glancing at the screen. "It must be broken," she said with a shrug. "You can just take them. No charge." I hesitated. That seemed too good to be true. I half expected her to stop me when I tried to leave, but she didn't. I walked out of the store with my bag, the box still nestled inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, Mia and I sat on the couch watching Netflix, the box placed innocently on the coffee table. I was trying to focus on the movie, but something about the box felt off. It wasn't just the symbol, it was the way it seemed to pulse in the low light. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like it was waiting for something. I didn't know why, but I opened it. Inside was a small, weathered notebook. The pages were yellowed and covered in odd, illegible writing. The first few pages were filled with strange symbols, some that I had seen before in books about the occult. The further I read, the more I realized the notebook wasn't just a collection of weird scribbles, it was a journal. A journal of someone's experiences with the items in the dollar store. I skimmed through the pages, reading snippets about people who had bought these items, dolls, mirrors, trinkets, and how they had disappeared shortly afterward. The last entry was chilling. The whispers started when I took the doll. They tell me things, dark things. Secrets. The voices will never stop. I slammed the notebook shut, feeling my heart race. The room felt colder now, like the temperature had dropped even further. I stood up, almost knocking the box off the table. That's when I heard it, a whisper. It was barely audible at first, like a voice from far away, but then it grew louder, clearer. It was coming from the box. "It's not too late. You can still leave it behind." I froze. My body went rigid with terror, and my mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. It had to be some kind of prank. Maybe the notebook was some kind of trick, rigged to make noises. But the more I listened, the clearer the voice became. "Take the doll. Take the mirror. They want you. They'll whisper forever. I grabbed the box, my hands shaking, and threw it into the trash. I slammed the lid shut, not daring to look inside again. That night, I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't. The whispering continued, echoing through my mind, even when I covered my head with a pillow. The next morning, I woke up, hoping it had all been a bad dream. But when I went to the trash, the box was gone. Not only that, but the entire shelf of items I'd seen the night before was completely empty, like it had never been there. I went back to the dollar store the next day, determined to figure out what was going on. The place looked completely normal. No dusty shelf, no strange boxes. But when I walked to the checkout, I saw the same elderly cashier, and she gave me a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Did you find everything you needed?" she asked, her eyes glinting with something unsettling. I just nodded, my heart racing. I didn't want to stay another second in that place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. As I walked out of the store, I glanced over my shoulder. The store had returned to its normal, dull self, but for a moment, I thought I saw something moving in the corner of my eye. Something on the shelf. From that day on, I couldn't go back to the dollar store. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still there, waiting for me. Waiting for someone else to take home what I had left behind. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I still hear the whispers. Soft, creeping voices from the dark, promising that they'll never leave me. That I'm not the only one who's heard them. And I'm not the only one who'll ever hear them. Sometimes, the scariest part isn't what happens. It's knowing it could happen again. Story 2. It's not easy to talk about, but something happened that I can't explain, something that still haunts me. My name's Greg, and I'm in my early 30s. I live in a small, quiet town, one of those places where nothing ever happens, you know? People don't even lock their doors at night. It's the kind of place where you can leave your bike out in the front yard, and it'll still be there the next morning. Boring, safe, perfectly ordinary. But everything changed the day I walked into that dollar store. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I wasn't even planning to go. I was on my way home from the gym when I decided to stop by the store to pick up a few things. Dish soap, a pack of gum, and maybe something to snack on while I caught up on some shows that evening. The kind of things that don't really matter, but somehow end up on your shopping list. The store was the same as always, dimly lit, shelves stacked with random things. They always had weird stuff that you'd never find anywhere else, but honestly, I liked that. It gave the place a certain charm. I was grabbing a bottle of soda when something caught my eye, an old, unmarked VHS tape. I remember standing there, staring at it for a while. It was buried in a dusty corner of a shelf that barely anyone noticed. No title, no label, nothing. Just a plain, black tape with a faded sticker on the side. There was something about it, though, that made me feel uneasy, like it was out of place. But I didn't think much of it. I was always one to dig through thrift stores and secondhand stuff. The thought of a forgotten VHS tape just seemed interesting. So without giving it a second thought, I tossed it into my basket, paid for my things, and went home. That night, I popped the tape into my old VCR, the kind that was collecting dust in my living room. The screen flickered for a moment, then a grainy image appeared. The video wasn't anything special, just a regular house, it seemed. I figured it was some old family footage or a home video, and I settled into my couch to watch. But as the video went on, things started to feel off. The footage was unsettling, like the kind of video you'd see in a found footage horror film. There was no dialogue, no music, just the sound of muffled footsteps and the occasional creak of floorboards. The camera was shaky, as though the person holding it was walking around nervously. Then, the camera zoomed in on a man standing in the corner of a room, facing away from the camera. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, and I could barely make out his features. But I knew something was wrong. The scene was too still, too quiet, and there was this feeling creeping up my spine, like I was being watched. I shrugged it off as just a weird video, maybe some kind of creepy film someone left behind. But then something happened. The door to the room in the video opened, and I heard a voice. Just a whisper at first. "Greg." I froze. My blood ran cold. There's no way I misheard that. The voice, it sounded like someone I knew. But that was impossible. I didn't know anyone who would be in that video, let alone calling my name. My heart was racing. I hit the stop button, but the tape didn't stop right away. It kept playing for a moment longer, and then the image faded into static. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind racing. Was I imagining it? Maybe it was some weird coincidence. I stood up, walked around my apartment, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. But when I returned to the living room, I noticed something strange. The VCR had ejected the tape on its own. I didn't remember it doing that. Hesitant, I picked it up, ready to toss it out. But as I turned it over, I saw that the faded sticker now had a new mark on it, my name. My mind was spinning. What was going on? I had to be losing it. I decided to leave it alone, but I couldn't. I had to know what happened next. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything else, so I put the tape back in. The video resumed right where it left off. Only this time, it wasn't the same. The house in the video had changed. There was a different man in the room now, and he was looking straight into the camera. I felt my heart race as I stared at the screen. The man wasn't smiling. He was staring, just staring at me. The image on the screen felt too real. I looked around my living room. It was dark, but I could have sworn I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow, maybe. I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard a faint sound, the same creak I heard in the video. I got up and checked every room, but there was nothing. Just my own paranoia playing tricks. The next day, I heard the first rumor. People were disappearing. At first, it was just one or two. People I didn't know personally, but who lived in my town. They went missing, and no one knew where they went. No signs of struggle, no clues. It was like they just vanished. I couldn't stop thinking about the video. I tried to brush it off as some strange coincidence. But then I noticed something small but chilling. The people who disappeared seemed to match the faces I'd seen on the tape. And the man in the video, the one who was staring at me, he wasn't just a random figure. I realized I'd seen him somewhere before. It was like I knew him, like I'd seen him in town. That's when things escalated. The disappearances continued. More people were taken one by one. And every time I watched the tape, it felt like the events were happening closer and closer to me. It wasn't just the people in the video anymore. It was my town. It was my life. I decided to stop watching the tape, but it didn't stop. I started finding strange things around my house. Little clues. A note on my doorstep one morning saying, "You're next." A picture of me standing outside the store, taken from a distance. And that same man, he was always there, lurking in the background. I went to the police, but they dismissed it as nothing. No one believed me. They told me it was all just my imagination running wild, that I was seeing things. But I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew something was happening, and it was getting worse. One night, I woke up to a sound, a knock at the door. It was 3 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated for a moment, but then I heard it again. A knock, sharp and insistent. I crept to the door, peeking through the peephole. And there he was, the man from the video. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I froze. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't want to know if he was really there, or if it was just another hallucination. But I had no choice. I opened the door. Nothing. There was no one there. Just the silence. The stillness. I stepped outside, my breath catching in my throat. But then I heard it. A voice. Soft, almost a whisper. "Greg." I turned. And there he was, standing in the shadows. I ran. I didn't stop running until I was at the police station. But when I told them everything, about the tape, about the man, they just gave me that look. The look that says, "You're losing it." But I know what I saw. I know what's happening. The tape wasn't just some random thing. It's connected to the disappearances. And if I'm right, I'm next. I don't know how much longer I have. But I'll tell you this, if you ever find an unmarked VHS tape, don't even think about it. Don't even touch it. Because once you do, it's like you've opened a door. And once that door is open, you can't close it again. I can't close it. I don't think I ever will. And maybe one day, you'll see my name on that tape too. Story 3. I've been thinking a lot about that doll lately. If you told me years ago that something so simple could change our lives forever, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. I suppose this is my way of trying to make sense of it all. Let me start from the beginning, though. My name's Jennifer, and I live in a quiet little town in New England. It's the kind of place where nothing ever really happens. There's a diner that everyone goes to, a small grocery store, and the same faces every day. A perfect, ordinary place to settle down, which is exactly why I ended up here. I'm married to Dave, he's a teacher at the local high school, and we've got a daughter, Lily, who's 4 years old. It was a simple life, really. The kind of life people dream of when they picture themselves raising a family. Nothing fancy, just normal. At least, that's how it was. One afternoon, Dave and I decided to take Lily to the dollar store to pick up some new toys. We didn't need anything special, just a few knickknacks for her to play with. The store was cluttered, with aisles stuffed full of everything from cleaning supplies to snacks. It wasn't the cleanest place, but it had everything we needed, and the prices were right. We wandered through the aisles, looking for something to catch Lily's attention. And that's when we found it. It was a doll, sitting on a low shelf in the back corner, almost hidden. It wasn't like the other toys, no flashy colors or commercial branding. Just a simple, plastic doll with a painted smile on its face. Its eyes were large and wide, and there was something about the way it looked that was unsettling, but not in an obvious way. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd probably dismiss if you didn't stop to really look at it. Lily immediately grabbed it. She loved it. I thought it was harmless, just a doll, right? Dave and I exchanged a glance, shrugged, and put it in the cart. A smile seemed to play at the corners of the doll's painted lips as we left the store. I remember feeling a little uneasy about it, but I chalked it up to being tired. After all, we were just running errands, nothing unusual. The next few days passed by like any other, until I noticed something strange. It was the doll. Lily had it sitting on her bed, just like she always did, but it wasn't in the same position as before. The smile had grown wider, almost impossibly so. I could have sworn it was different, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just the way the light hit it, or maybe it was just me overthinking things. But then, the next day, I saw it again. The smile was even wider. And this time, its eyes, they looked darker, almost like they were staring straight at me. I didn't say anything to Dave, though. He'd laugh it off, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I was just seeing things. But then, as the days went by, I started to notice changes in Lily, too. She was always a sweet child, so full of energy, but she began to act a little off. It started small. She became quiet, withdrawn. She wouldn't talk to Dave or me as much. At first, we thought it was just a phase. She'd be fine again tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. One night, I woke up to hear her talking in her sleep. It wasn't normal mumbling. No, this was different. She was speaking clearly, and in a voice that wasn't hers. I rushed into her room, heart pounding in my chest. "Lily?" I whispered. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. She didn't move, didn't respond. I shook her gently. "Lily, wake up." She blinked slowly, her eyes taking a moment to focus on me. "Mommy," she said, her voice distant, like she wasn't really seeing me. The doll said it's time. "Time for what?" I asked, but she didn't answer. She just turned her head slowly toward the corner of the room, where the doll sat, grinning. I felt a chill run through me. That smile, it wasn't the same as it had been the day before. It was bigger, like it was stretching across its face. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like it was alive, like it was watching us, waiting. The next morning, I asked Lily about it again, but she seemed fine. She was playing like her usual self, no signs of the strange behavior from the night before. Dave didn't seem concerned either. He thought it was just a nightmare, a product of her overactive imagination. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The days went on, and things kept getting weirder. Lily started saying strange things. "The doll wants to play," she'd say. "The doll says I should do this." And then one afternoon I caught her. She was standing in front of the mirror, holding the doll, her expression blank. She wasn't moving, just staring at her reflection. I called her name, but she didn't respond. I went over to her, trying to take the doll from her hands, but she held on tight. "No, Mommy," she whispered. "The doll says it's my turn now." I didn't know what to think. It was like Lily wasn't herself anymore. She was different. And it wasn't just the doll, it was the way she spoke, the way she looked at things. It was like she was being controlled, like something was inside her, pulling the strings. I knew I had to do something. That night, I went to the dollar store. I didn't tell Dave. I didn't want to scare him, but I had to get answers. I went straight to the toy section, looking for the same doll. I found it on the same shelf, sitting there like it had been waiting for me. But when I reached out to touch it, I froze. The doll's smile, it was gone. Instead, its face was frozen in a grotesque, unnatural grin. Its eyes were hollow like black pits, and the room seemed to grow colder the longer I stared at it. I knew right then that something had to be done. I grabbed the doll and hurried to the counter. I didn't care about the cost. I just needed to get it out of our house. The cashier looked at me strangely when I slammed the doll on the counter, but I didn't care. I paid and left. That night, I burned the doll in the backyard. I watched the flames consume it, but even as it melted, the smile remained, etched into the plastic. I felt a sense of relief as I stood there, watching the fire burn out. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The next morning, Lily was back to normal. She was talking to Dave and me like she always did. She laughed, played, and even asked for cereal. But there was one thing I noticed. The doll was back in her room. I asked her how it got there, but she just smiled. The doll says it's not done yet. I don't know how the doll came back. I don't know what it wants or what it's doing to my daughter. But I know this, something is controlling her. And every day, that smile gets a little wider. Maybe it's still out there somewhere. Maybe it's waiting for its next victim. So if you ever see a smiling doll on a shelf, just remember this. Some smiles aren't meant to be friendly. Some smiles are meant to take control. And if you see one that smiles back, run. Story 4. I don't know if what happened to me was some kind of freak accident or if there's just something I missed, but I'll never look at a dollar store the same way again. And to this day, I still can't shake the feeling that something or someone might be watching me. So let me backtrack a bit. My name's Julie. At the time of all this, I was 22 years old and working the graveyard shift at a dollar store in a small, quiet town in Texas. I wasn't doing anything glamorous, just a cashier and stocker, pulling shifts at odd hours. But it was a steady job, and the pay wasn't bad for someone trying to get through school and make rent. It was one of those jobs where you could put your headphones in and get lost in your thoughts, doing the same routine every night, and it felt like you were just another face in a tiny, predictable world. My family was pretty normal. My parents were quiet people, and I was the only child. I lived alone in a small apartment a few blocks from the store, in a building where you could hear your neighbor's TV, but never their voices. You get the picture, peaceful if a little dull. It was on one of those long shifts, around 11:30 p.m., when I first felt something was off. The store had this weird, empty vibe around that time. No customers, no chatter, just the hum of the fluorescent lights above and the occasional sound of the air conditioning kicking on. It was too quiet. That night, I was organizing some canned goods, not really paying much attention to anything. I mean, it was late, and I was half dozing, the kind of tired where you're doing something but your brain is elsewhere. That's when I noticed it, something strange at the corner of my eye. I saw a man. He was standing near the back aisle, just beyond the canned goods section, staring straight at me. His face was pale, with sunken eyes. I could have sworn he wasn't there a second ago. And the way he was standing, so still like he wasn't breathing, it made me freeze. It wasn't like he was a regular customer either. He wasn't holding anything, just standing there in that aisle like he was waiting for something. I told myself it was nothing. Probably just someone who'd wandered in off the street, a regular weird late-night shopper. Maybe I hadn't noticed him earlier, or maybe he'd been waiting for me to finish what I was doing. But I couldn't help the small, creeping sensation that slithered up my spine. So, I cleared my throat and went about my work. I didn't even look back at him. But when I did, a few seconds later, he was gone. Just vanished. Now, I'm not someone who jumps to conclusions. I don't do horror movies. I don't scare easily, but that moment, something about it didn't sit right. I figured I was tired and maybe just imagining things, so I pushed it out of my mind. But that was just the beginning. The next night, things got worse. It started small again, little things that didn't make sense. I came in at 11 like usual, and everything seemed normal. The store was quiet, empty. But as I started stocking shelves, I noticed the items weren't where I'd left them the night before. I'd organized the cleaning aisle the night before, and everything was in neat rows. But now, things were scattered, like someone had come in and rummaged through everything while I wasn't looking. The brooms were knocked over, the bottles of bleach shifted to the other end of the aisle, and there were a few cans of air freshener lying sideways on the floor. It wasn't just disorganized, it was almost as if someone had been looking for something, tearing through the place. Must have been some kids, or maybe the other guy on shift. I mumbled to myself, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But even as I cleaned it up, I kept glancing around. The store felt different somehow, heavy. That night, there were no customers, just like the night before. And when the clock hit 2 a.m., that's when the really strange things started happening. I was standing behind the counter, wiping down the register, when I heard it. A sound like footsteps, coming from the far corner of the store. Now, I'd worked this shift before, and it was a ghost town at that hour. But tonight, I wasn't sure. The footsteps were soft but deliberate, almost like someone was pacing, testing the floors to see if they'd creak. I froze, staring at the doorway. Was someone there? A customer? A manager coming in early? I wasn't sure, but I did know this. No one had come through the door for over 2 hours. My heart started to race. I decided to go check. I stepped out from behind the counter and walked through the aisles. As I passed the canned goods, I saw something that made my stomach drop. One of the aisles was different. The shelves had been rearranged. More than that, it looked like some of the items were deliberately placed in odd positions, like someone was setting up some kind of twisted display. I was starting to get a bad feeling. Maybe it's just the night crew messing around, I muttered to myself, but even I didn't believe that. No one would rearrange the shelves like this. I knew I hadn't done it. That's when I heard it. A loud, distinct thump from the back of the store. My heart skipped. It was like something heavy had fallen. I walked toward the noise, trying to act casual. But as I rounded the corner, I froze. The same man I'd seen the night before. He was standing in the aisle again. But this time, he wasn't just staring at me. He was standing next to a shelf, one hand gripping the edge as if he'd been moving it. The instant I saw him, he looked up and our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then, before I could react, he darted out of the aisle and disappeared into the back room. I didn't follow him. I should have, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were cemented to the floor. The next few hours were a blur. I kept hearing things, whispers coming from aisles, soft knocks on the walls, and the unmistakable sound of something heavy dragging across the floor. But when I checked, there was no one. The aisles were empty, the store silent. The worst part? I thought I was imagining it. But the following nights? They weren't any better. Each time I worked, I felt like I was being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me just out of sight. And then one night, I saw it for myself. I was locking up the store, about to head out. The doors were all secured, the lights dimmed. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye, an item out of place in the doorway. A single dusty box, sitting in the middle of the threshold. I bent down to pick it up. When I opened it, I found a note. The note was simple, one sentence written in thick, dark ink. "You're not alone here." I turned around, my heart racing. The store, the aisles, the shelves, they felt different. And as I stood there, feeling the weight of the silence around me, I heard it, the soft, dragging sound again, this time closer than ever before. I've never worked a midnight shift since that night. I still don't know what happened, but something tells me that whatever I heard and saw in that store wasn't just my imagination. The thing that still chills me to the bone. I've heard rumors. A few months ago, a coworker quit without saying much, and when I asked about him, I found out he'd been working the midnight shift too. He vanished without a trace after his last night on the job. And now, I can't help but wonder, what if I was just the next person on their list? What if I'm not the only one who heard those footsteps? Sometimes, I think about what would have happened if I'd gone to the back room. If I'd followed that man or confronted whatever was lurking there. But in the end, I suppose it doesn't matter. Whatever was in that store, whatever was watching me, it's still out there. Watching, waiting. And who knows? Maybe it's still lurking, just behind the next aisle. So if you ever find yourself in a dollar store late at night, well, you might want to pay attention to those strange noises. You never know who or what might be listening. Story 5. It's funny, isn't it? How you think your life is just ordinary, and then one small decision, one random moment can change everything. I never thought I'd be here, sharing this story with you, but after everything that happened, I figured I might as well warn someone else. Maybe it'll save you from making the same mistake I did. I'm Emily, just an average college student, trying to make it through life on a budget. At the time, I was living in a small, one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town. Nothing too exciting. You know the type, no wild nights, no late parties. Just me, a pile of textbooks, and a pretty mundane routine. I had a part-time job at a coffee shop, just to keep me afloat, and a bunch of late-night study sessions. Honestly, I was just trying to get through the semester without losing my mind. It was one of those nights, late, rainy, and chilly. You know the kind, when it's hard to focus on anything because the world outside your window is so quiet and calm, but your mind's still racing. I had just finished a shift at the coffee shop, and, being completely broke, I decided to head to the dollar store. I know, not exactly glamorous. But at that point, anything to save a buck was a win. I wandered through the aisles, trying to find some cheap snacks and cleaning supplies. The usual dollar store routine. Nothing out of the ordinary. The lights flickered, and the place smelled like stale air and plastic, just the usual ambience of a late-night dollar store. Then, tucked behind a stack of old, dusty cans, I saw it. A coupon. It was half-buried, crumpled, and almost blending into the background. What caught my attention was the faded text, a lifetime of savings. I chuckled to myself. I mean, who doesn't want a lifetime of savings, right? I picked it up. The paper was thin, almost brittle, and when I turned it over, there was no fine print, no expiration date. Just those words, a lifetime of savings. It felt strange, but I didn't think much of it. I was desperate enough for a deal that I stuffed it into my pocket and went about my shopping. That night, after a long study session, I remembered the coupon. I was too tired to go out for groceries, so I figured I'd give it a shot. I headed to the store, the coupon still in my pocket, just out of curiosity. When I walked in, the cashier didn't seem surprised at all when I handed her the coupon. She barely glanced at it, just scanned it and said, "You're all set." It was almost like she'd seen it 1,000 times before. I left with my usual haul, cheap snacks, soap, a couple of random items, and as I walked home, I didn't think anything of it. I was just happy to save a couple of bucks. But then things started happening. At first, it was small stuff. I didn't notice the change right away, but looking back, I can see it now. The next morning, I woke up late for class. I figured I'd overslept. But when I got to the kitchen, I found that half of my food had gone bad overnight. The milk had curdled in a matter of hours, and the bread was moldy, even though I'd just bought it the day before. I shrugged it off. Maybe I had just missed the expiration date or something. It happens, right? I just bought new stuff and moved on. The next few days were off. I had started noticing little things decaying, crumbling away. The plants in my apartment, ones that had been thriving, started wilting for no reason. My favorite coffee mug cracked right down the middle, as if it had been dropped from a great height, even though I hadn't touched it. And then the worst part, my favorite pair of shoes, the ones I'd worn nearly every day for over a year, started falling apart. The soles were coming loose, the stitching unraveling. It was like they were being slowly eaten away by something I couldn't see. I didn't make the connection right away. I told myself it was just bad luck, bad timing. But when I used the coupon again, this time for some cleaning supplies, I began to notice something else. I felt tired. No, not tired, drained. It was like something inside me was slowly being pulled out, piece by piece. I didn't feel like myself anymore. I didn't really think it could be the coupon. That seemed insane, right? A coupon draining your energy? It sounded like something out of a cheap horror movie. But the more I used it, the worse I felt. The store became a place I couldn't escape from. It wasn't just the things around me falling apart. It was me. I started losing weight, not in a good way. I'd eat, but it felt like the food wasn't sticking. My skin started looking pale, my hair thinning. At first, I thought it was just stress, lack of sleep, but then I started hearing things. Whispers, voices at night. It was always the same message. Soft, like a voice from a distance, saying things like, "Keep using it, just a little longer." And every time I heard that voice, something in my apartment would decay faster. A picture frame would crack, or a drawer would fall apart on its own. It was like my life, everything around me was decaying. Slowly, quietly, piece by piece. I couldn't keep going like this. I had to stop. But every time I tried to get rid of the coupon, something strange happened. It would always show up again, tucked into my wallet, hidden in my pockets, or even wedged between the pages of my textbooks. I tried to tell my roommate, but she just laughed it off. "You're overthinking things, Em. It's just a stupid coupon." But it wasn't. It wasn't just a coupon. That night, the whispers were louder. They were right behind me, almost in my ear. I could feel them, like a breath on the back of my neck. It was no longer about savings. It was about something else. Something far more sinister. I decided I had to get rid of it once and for all. I took the coupon outside, ready to burn it, throw it into the fire, and be done with it. But as I stood there, holding the coupon over the flame, I realized something terrifying. The coupon wasn't burning. The paper didn't crisp, didn't catch fire. It just stood there cold and untouched. I ran back into the apartment, panic rising. I couldn't keep living like this. I called the store, but the line was always busy or no one answered. No one believed me. Not even when I asked around about the coupon, trying to get answers. And then came the moment of reckoning. The worst part of it all. I woke up one morning and found my entire apartment gone. The furniture was rotting, the walls crumbling. The air smelled stale like death. My room had collapsed. The once clean, safe apartment now seemed like a decaying husk of a place. Everything around me had been consumed, as if the coupon had drained the life out of it all. My belongings, my home, me. I still don't know how I escaped. It wasn't the coupon. It was something far darker, something I can't fully explain. But I know this, something in that coupon was alive, and it wanted to take everything from me. I don't use coupons anymore. I don't shop in dollar stores. But every now and then, I feel that pull. The whispers, soft at first, as if it's waiting for me to use just one more coupon. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to make the same mistake I did. Sometimes, things aren't what they seem. You might think it's just a cheap coupon. But some deals come with a price. And trust me, it's a price you don't want to pay. Story 6. I don't know how to begin this, or how to explain what happened to my family. Maybe you'll think it's all just a strange coincidence, or maybe you'll think I'm losing my mind. But I swear, what happened to us was real. And no, it wasn't some creepy ghost or some strange demon. It wasn't supernatural. It was something far more terrifying, the slow, subtle unraveling of our very memories. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Sarah, and at the time this all began, I was 28. I was living with my husband, Mark, and our 7-year-old daughter, Lily, in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was the kind of place where you could leave your door unlocked and not think twice about it. The sun shone just a little too brightly on summer mornings, and you could always hear the faint hum of kids playing outside or the sound of lawnmowers going early on weekends. Everything was, for the most part, normal. Boring even. My days consisted of waking up early, getting Lily ready for school, going to work as an office assistant, and coming home to make dinner. Mark worked from home most days, so we had this sort of comfortable routine. I had no reason to think anything was off. It all started one evening when Mark and I went to the dollar store. It was just a typical trip, nothing unusual. We were grabbing some basic groceries and supplies. As we walked down the aisles, Lily's little hand tugged at mine, and she pointed excitedly at a loaf of bread. "Mom, can we get this one?" she asked, her big blue eyes shining. I glanced at the loaf. It wasn't anything special, just a plain, packaged loaf of bread, probably a bit stale, but it was cheap. At the time, that was all that mattered. "Sure," I said, picking it up and tossing it into our cart. We paid for it and went home. That night, we had the bread with dinner. It wasn't anything special, just a side to our spaghetti. We didn't think much of it. But the next day, something strange happened. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, when I realized that I couldn't quite remember what had happened the day before. I knew we'd had dinner, but the details were fuzzy. Mark mentioned something about our neighbor, but I couldn't recall ever talking to him. I chalked it up to being tired and moved on. Later that evening, Mark and I had a conversation about how we'd never gotten around to planning our vacation. He seemed surprised that I didn't remember planning it, but I was certain we had. We'd even talked about a few destinations. Or had we? It didn't make sense. The conversation felt familiar, but at the same time, it was like I was hearing it for the first time. The next day, Mark and I both had the same experience. He couldn't remember things from the previous week, important things like when we'd last paid the bills, or what we'd done for Lily's school project. It was all slipping away. At first, we both thought it was stress, but it wasn't just that. Over the next few days, the forgetting became more frequent. Mark forgot a work meeting he had scheduled, and I couldn't remember if I'd sent an important email. Lily came to me one day, asking if I remembered our trip to the park a few days ago, but I had no recollection of it. And it wasn't just the little things. Big pieces of our past started to blur. I forgot how long we'd been married. Mark didn't remember the first time we met, or even some of the early moments with Lily. Every time we ate another slice of that bread, something else seemed to vanish. It was as if the loaf was slowly erasing the past, and we were just left with these strange, empty spaces where memories should be. I started to get paranoid. I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to remember the way I'd looked when I first met Mark. I would stare at photos of our wedding, trying to piece together the events that had led to that day. But it was all slipping away. I began questioning everything. Were we the same family anymore? Were we even the same people? Or had someone or something been erasing our memories piece by piece? And if so, who or what was behind it? As the days went on, things only got worse. We would wake up in the morning, and there would be an eerie silence in the house. No one knew what we'd done the day before. We couldn't even remember if we'd had dinner or not. Mark started to become more withdrawn, and I felt like I was losing touch with everything. The more we ate, the more we forgot. One evening, we noticed something even stranger. The bread seemed to have changed. When we opened the loaf, the slices looked different, almost like they were newer. The edges of the bread were soft and freshly baked, and there was a strange smell that we hadn't noticed before. But the worst part was when we looked at the label. The expiration date had changed. We tried to throw the loaf away, but the next day, there was another one. Same brand, same loaf. And it was the same one that kept appearing on our kitchen counter every morning, no matter how many times we got rid of it. It was like the bread was haunting us, bringing us closer to the edge of madness. Mark couldn't handle it anymore. He went to the store, thinking he could buy a new loaf, something different. But when he returned, he was pale and shaking. "I saw something," he whispered to me. "Something I shouldn't have seen." "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "The store," he trailed off. "It wasn't a dollar store. It was different. The shelves they were full of bread. All kinds of bread, but none of it was the same. It was like they were all different, but they were all the same, and I couldn't see the people around me. It was like they weren't there." I tried to make sense of what he was saying, but nothing made sense anymore. And that night, it got worse. I woke up to hear Mark talking in his sleep, whispering things I couldn't understand. When I tried to wake him up, he didn't respond. His eyes were open, but he wasn't really there. It was like his mind was somewhere else, lost in the fog. That's when I realized the truth. It wasn't the bread. It wasn't the store. It was us. We had been losing ourselves for days, weeks even, and we hadn't even noticed. The bread wasn't the cause, but it was the trigger. It had unlocked something in us, something deep and dark, that was slowly but surely erasing everything. I don't know what happened to us after that. All I know is that when I woke up the next morning, Lily was gone, vanished without a trace. Mark and I searched the house, calling her name, but she was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had never been there at all. There was no evidence of her, not a single trace. It was like she had been erased, just like the memories. We called the police, but no one believed us. They said we were just stressed, just imagining things. But we knew. We knew something was wrong. And now all I can do is wait. Wait for the next slice of bread to appear, and for the memories to keep slipping away. Maybe one day, I'll forget this story too. Maybe that's the real horror, the slow, quiet erasure of everything we are, everything we've been. Sometimes I wonder if we'll all just disappear, and no one will ever know we were here. So if you ever find yourself in a dollar store, standing in front of the bread aisle, just remember, you never know what you might be buying. Because sometimes, what you forget is what really matters. Story 7. Sometimes the scariest things can come from the most ordinary places. We think we're safe, just going about our day, when something unexpected happens. Something that makes us question the world around us. That's how it started for me, just a normal day with my son. But it turned into a nightmare I still can't shake. I'll never forget the day we went to that dollar store. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, sunny, the kind of weather where everything just feels normal. I wasn't expecting anything strange to happen. Just another trip to grab a few things, snacks, toothpaste, a new broom to replace the one that had seen better days. It wasn't the first time I'd taken my son there, and I honestly didn't think much of it when we walked in. My son, Alex, was 8 at the time. He was full of energy, always bouncing around, asking for toys every time we went anywhere. And usually I'd just say no, but that day, well, I wasn't feeling it. We had a little extra time, and I figured it would be nice to let him pick something. He was drawn to the toy aisle as soon as we walked in. It's a typical dollar store setup, bright lights, aisles packed with cheap goods, and this old smell of plastic and cardboard. But something about that aisle, that toy section, felt different. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. The toys were all there, as you'd expect. Plastic dolls, action figures, little toy cars, stuffed animals. But there was this oppressive silence, like the whole aisle was holding its breath. It was so quiet, in fact, that I couldn't remember hearing anything from the rest of the store. It was all too still. Alex was staring at a shelf near the back, his hands stretched out, not touching anything but simply standing there, unmoving. I walked over, and he turned to me with a grin. "Dad, I want this one." It was a little wooden toy soldier. It was old, chipped, and the paint had worn off in places, but something about it stood out to Alex. I didn't think much of it, just another impulse buy, I figured. I nodded and grabbed it for him, and we checked out like we always did. But as we left the store and walked back to the car, I started to notice a change. It wasn't immediate, but I could see it when I looked at Alex. He was quieter than usual, staring out the window as we drove. I asked him if he was okay, but he just nodded, barely meeting my eyes. The next few days were when things started to get really weird. Alex started to play with the toy soldier nonstop. I'd find him sitting on the floor, moving it around, making little sound effects, but he was always staring at it with this intense, almost unnatural focus. It was like he couldn't stop. And it wasn't just that, he started to act different too. He was more withdrawn, more distant. There was something in his eyes that wasn't there before. like he wasn't fully there anymore. I tried talking to him about it, but he'd just brush me off, his answers short, his attention always focused on that little toy. One evening, I was sitting on the couch, reading, when I heard him talking to himself in his room. At first, I thought he was just playing, but then I heard the words. "I know what you want. You can have it soon. Just wait for me." I froze. I stood up, my heart pounding, and walked to his room. He was sitting on the floor, the toy soldier in his hand. His eyes were wide, and his lips were moving, but he wasn't speaking to anyone in the room. He was talking to something. "Alex," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who are you talking to?" He looked up at me, his expression blank. "It's okay, Dad. They just want me to play. They're waiting for me." A cold chill ran through me. Who's he talking about? I thought maybe he was just tired, that it was nothing, but that night, something else happened. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. I glanced at the clock. It was 3 a.m. My heart raced as I heard the unmistakable sound of Alex's voice, calling my name, soft but urgent. "Dad, come see." I jumped out of bed, my body moving on its own. I reached his room, and when I opened the door, I nearly stumbled back. Alex was sitting there, his toy soldier still in his hand, but his eyes weren't the same. They were wide, empty, like there was nothing behind them. He didn't speak, just stared at me. "Dad, I can't leave. I have to stay here," he said, his voice hollow. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I had to do something. I tried pulling him away from the toy, but he didn't move. It was like his body was locked in place. The toy soldier felt cold against my fingers, colder than it should have been. The next morning, I went back to the dollar store. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but I needed to understand what was happening. When I reached the toy section, everything seemed normal. The same plastic dolls, the same cheap toys. But when I walked past that particular shelf, the one where Alex had picked up the toy soldier, something caught my eye. At the back of the shelf, behind the other toys, was another soldier. This one looked exactly the same, but it was almost staring at me. I felt this strange pull, like it was calling to me. I reached for it, and as soon as my fingers touched it, I felt a sharp, cold sensation shoot up my arm. I pulled my hand away, but the sensation didn't leave. It was like something was draining my warmth, my energy. I looked down, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw a figure in the corner of my eye, something dark, lurking just out of sight. I grabbed the soldier and rushed to the checkout. The cashier looked at me strangely, but I didn't care. I couldn't leave fast enough. I got home, and when I opened the door to Alex's room, I found him sitting on the floor, staring at the toy soldier, his hands clenched tight. "You can't take him, Dad," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "They won't let you." I backed away, my head spinning. What was happening? What had happened to my son? The more I tried to stop him from playing with that toy, the worse things got. He wasn't just distant anymore. He wasn't even there half the time. It was like his soul had been taken over by something darker, something that had been waiting for him in that store, hiding in the toys. I called a friend who knew a little about curses, but when I explained what had been going on, they just laughed it off. "A curse? Come on, man, it's just a toy. Kids are weird sometimes. Maybe he's just growing up." But I knew. I knew something had happened in that dollar store. And it wasn't just Alex who was affected. It was that whole section, the silent toy section, the one no one paid attention to. I thought about returning the soldier, but every time I touched it, something inside me recoiled. I tried to take Alex out of the house, hoping that a change of scenery would snap him out of it, but nothing worked. We went to the park, and for the first time in days, he seemed to come alive again, laughing, running, playing. But when we got home, I found him standing by the door, clutching the soldier, whispering to it again. That's when I knew. There was no escaping it. Whatever had started in that dollar store wasn't going to stop. I'm telling you this now because I don't know how much longer I have before it takes me to. I'm trying to burn the soldier, but every time I get close, it feels like my hands are frozen. And Alex? He's not the same. Sometimes, I think I see him standing in the corner of the room, his eyes empty, waiting. The toys in that store, they're cursed. And once they have you, they won't let go. So if you ever find yourself in a dollar store and see a toy section that feels too quiet, too still, maybe think twice before you let your kids play with the toys. Sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones you see, but the ones you don't. And sometimes the only way out is to leave everything behind before it takes everything from you. Be careful, friend. Story 8. I wasn't planning on telling this story, but it's been bugging me for a while now. You know those nights when you're just sitting there, doing nothing, and something from your past pops up out of nowhere, creeping into your mind like a shadow you can't shake off. That's what happened to me, and I guess I'm sharing it with you now because maybe, just maybe, it'll stop haunting me. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Jenna, I'm 28, and I live in a little apartment on the outskirts of town. I work a desk job, mostly paperwork and phone calls. Nothing glamorous. You know, the kind of job that you could do in your sleep if you had to. Life was, well, it was fine. Nothing exciting, but nothing bad either. I had my routine. I went to work, came home, watched Netflix, ate my usual pizza, and went to bed. Normal, boring stuff. But then came the day I walked into that dollar store. Now I know what you're thinking. Dollar store? Really? But honestly, I loved that place. I always found little knickknacks I didn't need, but convinced myself I did. Stuff like candles, cheap picture frames, or random decorations for my apartment. On that particular day, I was just wandering around after work, looking for a way to fill the empty hours, when I stumbled upon a jewelry stand. It was one of those metal display racks with all kinds of cheap necklaces, rings, and bracelets. Honestly, I didn't even think I was in the mood for any of it, but something about this necklace caught my eye. It was simple, a thin silver chain with a small, oval-shaped pendant. The pendant was clear, almost like glass, with a faint glimmer to it, and it seemed to have a slight glow under the store's fluorescent lights. It wasn't anything special, but I bought it anyway. $5. Who doesn't like a little cheap accessory, right? That night, I got home, changed into my pajamas, and decided to wear the necklace. I figured, why not? It was a nice way to break the monotony. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the chain around my neck, and that's when I first noticed something strange. My reflection, well, it didn't exactly match what I was doing. At first, it was subtle. A small movement, almost imperceptible. My reflection seemed to tilt its head at an odd angle, just a fraction off from the way I was standing. I told myself it was just the lighting, maybe the angle, or maybe I was tired. But something about it felt wrong. It was like the reflection was looking at me with, I don't know, something different in its eyes. I couldn't explain it at the time, so I took the necklace off and went to bed, trying to forget about it. But the next day, when I put the necklace on again, it happened again. This time, I noticed it clearly. The reflection in the mirror was doing things I wasn't doing, tilting its head in ways that I wasn't, like it was watching me, analyzing me, studying me. And then the eyes. The first time I saw them glow, it was so faint I thought I was imagining it. Just a flicker in the dark. But when I turned off the lights that night, I saw it clearly. The eyes in the mirror, my eyes glowed. Not a bright glow, just a soft, eerie light, like the reflection was lit from behind. But it wasn't just the eyes. It was the way they seemed to follow me, even when I moved away from the mirror. I know what you're thinking. Maybe I was just tired, or maybe it was the cheap glass in the pendant playing tricks on my eyes. But that night, as I lay in bed, I started hearing something. Low at first, almost like a whisper. Jenna. I sat up straight, my heart racing. I looked around my room, but there was nothing there. No one. Just me, alone in my apartment. Jenna. It came again, louder this time, like it was coming from the mirror. I slowly got out of bed and approached it, the pendant dangling around my neck, its glow faint but steady. I stared at my reflection. And then it spoke. I know what you did. The voice was soft, almost sweet, but there was something in it that made my skin crawl. It sounded like me, but not quite. It was distorted, like it was coming from somewhere far away, like it was a voice trapped inside the mirror. I stumbled backward, tripping over my slippers as I backed away. What the hell? I whispered, my mind racing. This isn't possible. But it was happening. The reflection, my reflection, was speaking to me. I know all your secrets, Jenna, it continued. You can't hide from me. I ran out of the room, panic gripping my chest. I don't know how long I stayed away from the mirror, but when I finally returned, the reflection was normal again. Nothing unusual. My eyes were just eyes, the necklace hung around my neck like it should, and everything looked fine. But I knew something had changed. The following days were the same. The necklace stayed on, but the reflection kept acting differently. It would smile when I wasn't, blink when I didn't, and sometimes the eyes, those glowing eyes, would flicker in the dark. At night, the whispers would come again. They never said anything specific at first, just words, fragments that made no sense. She's waiting. She'll never leave. And then one night, the whisper turned cold. Jenna, do you remember the man? The one who never came back? I froze. My mind raced. The man I hadn't thought about in years. How could the reflection know about him? I ran to my phone, calling up every friend I could think of, anyone who would listen. but they all thought I was just stressed, paranoid. A few even laughed it off, said I was probably overthinking things. I wish I'd listened to that voice, the one telling me to stop wearing the necklace. But I didn't. Instead, I wore it every day, like I was tethered to it somehow. I thought if I just ignored it long enough, it would go away. But the mirror, it wouldn't let me. And then came the night it all escalated. I was in bed, lights off, the usual glow from the pendant faintly illuminating the room. The whispers were getting louder, almost like they were laughing at me now. The eyes in the mirror were glowing brighter than ever, more intense. Suddenly the reflection, my reflection, leaned toward the glass. "You think you can run? You think you can escape?" I screamed, stumbling out of bed and running to the living room. My reflection didn't follow me, but the eyes, they were still there, glowing from the dark, following me. I could feel them even though I wasn't looking. The whispers got worse, turning into voices, clear and distinct all around me. I couldn't tell where they were coming from anymore. The apartment felt alive, watching, listening. I grabbed the necklace, hoping to rip it off, but when I pulled it, something held it in place. That was when I realized it wasn't just a necklace. It was something else. Something wrong. I don't remember much after that. Everything went dark. The voices stopped, the eyes disappeared, and I woke up hours later in a cold sweat, the necklace still on my neck. The pendant was no longer glowing. But now, I can't look into mirrors. I can't go near any reflective surface without feeling like it's watching me. If you ever find yourself in a dollar store and see a cheap necklace that seems to glow in the light, don't buy it. Trust me, you don't want to know what's on the other side of the glass. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens. It's knowing that it could happen again. Story 9. You know how you get used to things in life. You don't notice the little oddities at first because everything just feels ordinary. And then one day something clicks, and you realize the world around you isn't as predictable as you thought. That's exactly what happened to me. It started at a dollar store. Let me backtrack for a second. I'm Lucas, a 17-year-old living in a quiet suburban town. At the time of this story, I was just your average teenager, nothing special. I didn't have a wild social life or anything like that, just school, home, and a part-time job at the local dollar store. The job was boring but easy, and honestly, I didn't mind it. It paid for the stuff I wanted, and that was enough for me. My parents were nice, nothing out of the ordinary. We lived in a small, 2-story house, and most of our neighbors were families who kept to themselves. I had a few close friends, but let's be real, nothing crazy happened in our town. People kept their heads down, and everything ran like clockwork. Even the local dollar store where I worked was just a regular, mundane place. The store was nothing special, a small building tucked between a bakery and a laundromat, with a faded neon sign that buzzed whenever the wind blew just right. If you asked anyone in town, they'd tell you it was the best place to grab snacks or random things you didn't even know you needed. And yet, something felt off, and I didn't figure that out until one night. The first thing that caught my attention was the storekeeper, Mr. Henley. He was always there. It didn't matter what time of day or night, Mr. Henley was there, standing behind the counter, scanning things with a quiet, unblinking gaze. It wasn't that he was rude or anything, quite the opposite, in fact. He was friendly, always polite, even a little too polite. He'd ask about my day when I came in for my shifts, and sometimes he'd tell me stories about the town, but there was always this weirdness about him. He never seemed to age. He'd been there since I started working, and when I asked around, people said he'd worked there for years, decades even. But I couldn't place it. Something was off about him. The weirdness hit me one evening when I was working the night shift. It was just me and him in the store. The lights flickered for a second, and I glanced over to Mr. Henley, who was sorting some boxes. He seemed completely unaffected, but as I looked closer, I noticed something strange. His face, it looked almost the same as it had a few months ago. There were no lines, no wrinkles. I mean, the guy had to be in his 60s, right? But there he was, looking as if he hadn't aged a day since I first started working there. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks. But then it started happening more. Little things. I'd go to work one evening, and he'd still be there, smiling like he'd been there forever. The more I saw him, the more his smile began to creep me out. It wasn't just a normal smile. It felt like he was hiding something beneath that calm demeanor. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to stay late after closing time. I was going to figure out what was going on with Mr. Henley. So after we closed the store that night, I waited. I watched from the back room, hidden behind the shelves. I don't know what I was expecting, but I didn't expect what I saw. Mr. Henley was still behind the counter, standing perfectly still, as if he was waiting for something. Then, out of nowhere, he turned toward the door. He didn't open it, though. He didn't even touch the handle. He just stood there. And then slowly, he started to change. His body seemed to shrink, his face shifting, his posture contorting into something unfamiliar. It was as if the man in front of me wasn't really him at all. His form flickered, and for a brief moment, I could see a younger version of him. A much younger man, with a more vibrant expression, wearing a different outfit. And then, just like that, the man in front of me reverted back to Mr. Henley. But this time, his eyes weren't the same. They were darker, almost empty. I froze. I thought I had seen something that couldn't be real. I don't know how long I stood there, hiding behind the shelves, heart pounding. I knew I should leave, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Mr. Henley's voice broke the silence. He didn't speak directly to me, but it felt like he was speaking through the walls, his voice seeping into the air like a whisper. You shouldn't have seen that. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Then, as if he had known I was there all along, he turned toward the back of the store and walked toward me. But his movements were unnerving, unnatural. Slow, deliberate, like he wasn't in a rush to get anywhere. I didn't wait around. I bolted from the back room and rushed toward the exit, not looking back. My heart was in my throat. I could hear Mr. Henley's footsteps following me, but when I reached the door and turned the handle, I realized something. The door wouldn't open. I pulled harder, panic setting in. Mr. Henley's voice rang out again, closer this time. You can't leave. Not now. Not ever. In that moment, I felt like I was trapped, like I had just crossed some invisible line I could never uncross. I could hear his footsteps getting closer, but the door still wouldn't budge. And that's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a regular man. Mr. Henley wasn't just a storekeeper. He was something far darker. Finally, I managed to force the door open. I didn't look back as I sprinted out of that store. I didn't stop running until I got home, slamming the door behind me and locking every lock in the house. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of Mr. Henley's voice echoed in my mind. I knew I had to go back. I couldn't just leave it like that, but I didn't know if I could survive a second encounter. I didn't go to work the next day. I didn't go to work the day after that, either. The thought of facing Mr. Henley, or whatever he was, terrified me. But soon, the guilt started eating away at me. What if someone else had already gone in there? What if they were in danger, too? A week later, I gathered enough courage to return to the dollar store, but when I stepped inside, everything was completely normal. Too normal. Mr. Henley was behind the counter, smiling his usual, eerily calm smile. He didn't look at me. He didn't even acknowledge me. I wanted to ask him what happened, but I couldn't find my voice. It was like I had walked into a nightmare that never ended. But then, something even stranger happened. A man walked into the store, and Mr. Henley's face changed. For a split second, I saw that younger version of him again, the man I had seen that night. And as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Mr. Henley was back to his old self, smiling at the new customer. But I knew the truth now. The man I had seen wasn't just a storekeeper. He was something far worse. And the scariest part, he could take anyone's form. Anyone who stepped foot into that store. I haven't been back to that store since. Every time I pass by, I get this feeling in my gut that something's wrong. I don't know if Mr. Henley is still there, or if he's changed into someone else. But here's the thing, I've seen him around town. Not often, but enough. And each time, I can't help but wonder, is it really him? Or is it someone else now? Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happened. It's knowing it could happen again. Story 10. I remember it like it was yesterday, even though at the time, it felt like any other evening. Just an ordinary Thursday, nothing out of the usual. My name's Josh, and I was 27 years old, living in a small town just outside of Sacramento. A quiet place, nothing too exciting. I worked at a local bookstore and spent most of my time reading or hanging out at my apartment. The kind of life where every day blended together. Most nights I'd walk to the nearby dollar store to pick up some snacks or household things. I don't know why I went there. It wasn't anything special, just the usual discount store with its bright fluorescent lights, cheap items, and the smell of plastic and cardboard. I could never put my finger on what drew me there, but it was my usual stop. This particular evening, it was just before 9 p.m. The store had that quiet, almost eerie calm. I'm sure you know the feeling, the kind of silence you only get when people are done shopping and the workers are tidying up. The air felt colder than it should have been, but I brushed it off, thinking the AC was just set too low. I grabbed my usual items, chips, some cans of soup, and a bag of gummy bears. But as I was about to head to the self-checkout, something caught my eye. In the back of the store, past the aisles of cleaning supplies and canned goods, there was a section I'd never noticed before. It wasn't that I hadn't been back there, I had. It was just that this time it seemed different. The aisle stretched farther than usual. I could barely make out the end of it. I shrugged, telling myself I was probably just tired. But curiosity nudged me to walk towards it. The farther I went, the more the familiar dollar store atmosphere started to feel wrong. The shelves were lined with items, but everything looked untouched. The boxes, the cans, even the little trinkets, they didn't have that slight layer of dust that accumulates on things sitting around too long. They were perfectly pristine. Too perfect. I wandered down the aisle, feeling a sense of time stretching out. There was no clock on the wall in the back of the store, but I could have sworn I'd been walking for ages. I stopped to check my phone, 9:15 p.m. I figured I must have gotten caught up in my head. But then I saw something else. On the shelf, in the middle of the aisle, was a small sign hanging from the edge. It said, "The Forever Sale, everything must go." The words were scrawled in a bold, slightly messy script that didn't match the usual pristine, impersonal signs around the store. For a moment, I thought about turning back, but something compelled me to keep walking. That's when I noticed it. Every item on the shelves, no matter how old or new, had the same exact price tag. Everything was $1. And I mean everything. Even things that should have cost way more than that. It didn't make sense. I reached out and grabbed a bottle of shampoo. The plastic was cold, but it felt real. Almost too real. I picked up a small box of cereal, the kind I'd seen 100 times before. But when I turned it over, the expiration date was blank. Just an empty space where it should have been. Same with everything else, no labels, no dates. Just items frozen in time, waiting for someone to buy them. I felt a shiver creep up my spine, but again, I brushed it off. Just a weird feeling, I thought. It's just late, I'm tired, and my mind's playing tricks. But something was wrong. I turned around, expecting to see the checkout counter, but when I looked back down the aisle, I couldn't see the end anymore. The shelves just stretched on forever. No, that's impossible, I thought. I've walked down this aisle before. It was just a few feet long. My heart started racing. I turned back to the shelves, then quickly back to where I'd come from. But the store felt different now, like it had shifted when I wasn't looking. The aisles weren't as familiar. The walls seemed to close in, and the lights flickered above me. I could still see the distant checkout lanes, but they felt so far away now, as though they were on the other side of the universe. Panic started to rise in my chest. This wasn't just weird. It was wrong. I felt like I was in some kind of trap. I turned quickly, looking for an exit. But no matter which way I looked, I couldn't see the door. I couldn't even find the aisles that I knew should be nearby. The Forever Sale aisle stretched on, always in front of me, like it was pulling me in deeper. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. It was as if the store was alive. No, it wasn't the store that was wrong, it was me. I was the one who was stuck. I pulled out my phone, but the screen stayed black. No matter how many times I pressed the power button, nothing happened. I was cut off from everything, and my own panic grew worse. I started to sweat, my heart hammering in my chest. I tried to scream, but the air was thick and no sound came out. I tried to turn back, but it was like the aisle itself twisted around me, forcing me to keep walking, pulling me deeper into the store. I kept walking, not knowing why I couldn't stop. It felt like time had stopped altogether. The fluorescent lights above buzzed in a steady hum, but I couldn't seem to find the end of the aisle. How long had I been here? An hour? A day? As I walked further down, I noticed something strange. Other people. They were there, standing in the aisles, just like me. But they were frozen, motionless. They weren't looking at me, weren't even acknowledging my presence. It was like they were part of the store now, trapped, just like I was. I looked closer at one man. He looked familiar. Maybe he'd been a regular at the store. But the longer I stared, the more his face seemed to blur. His features were fading, as if he wasn't even real. And then I heard it. The voice. It was soft at first, just a whisper in my ear, like someone standing behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. "Welcome to the Forever Sale," the voice said again. This time it was clearer. "You're not leaving. Not until you buy something." I froze. I looked back down the endless aisle. The price tags, the same old items. Everything remained untouched, never aging. The voice echoed in my head, getting louder, more insistent. The walls seemed to close in even tighter. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what had happened or why I was there. Was this real? Or was I losing my mind? But I knew one thing: if I didn't escape now, I might never leave. I turned, pushing through the frozen aisles, trying to get back to where I'd entered, but the store seemed to shift every time I moved. The aisles stretched and contracted, and I realized I wasn't just lost in the store. I was lost in time, and I might never get out. I don't know how long it's been since that night. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't feel the same anymore. I haven't gone back to that dollar store. I don't think I ever could. But sometimes late at night, I hear that voice again, whispering in my ear. The forever sale. It's waiting for you. And I wonder, if I ever go back, will I still be stuck there? Or has someone else already taken my place? I'm telling you this because you never know when you'll walk into a place that's not quite what it seems. Be careful where you go, because not every sale is meant to be made. Some prices are too high to pay. Trust me on that. If you made it this far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more stories that might just keep you up at night.